My sister-in-law sold my late grandma's priceless recipe book for a $50 spray tan, so I served her a fake anniversary cake in front of 200 guests, which exposed years of theft, lies, and manipulation that finally made her husband leave with the kids. My sibling, Brett, and I were once incredibly close. We had been the best of companions since our childhood days, constructing flimsy tree houses that certainly defied various safety regulations. The sole complication was his spouse, Jillian, who regarded me as if I were personally accountable for the planet's rising temperatures. I had exhausted every effort to gain Jillian's acceptance. I looked after their twin sons each Friday evening while they attended wine sampling events, where Jillian feigned disinterest in the complimentary beverages. I repaired their waste disposal unit when it began emitting piercing sounds at 3 in the morning. I even consumed her culinary creations that could have functioned as industrial bonding agents. Yet, Jillian behaved as though my very presence was an affront. Brett had acquired an uncanny knack for justifying Jillian's conduct. When Jillian neglected to invite me to Brett's unexpected birthday celebration, an event she had orchestrated for a quarter of a year, Brett reassured me she was simply overburdened. When she declared at our holiday meal that I exuded the aura of a single father because I brought store-bought biscuits, Brett chuckled as if she had uttered something brilliant. Jillian could engage in a bank heist, and Brett would commend her selection of escape vehicle. 3 weeks prior, Jillian burst into my living space, demanding my grandmother's recipe volume, a leather-bound diary filled with 7 decades of family culinary instructions. Each page bore the marks of vanilla essence and cherished recollections. Jillian was launching a culinary blog and required genuine vintage content for monetization. I explained that Grandma Rose had bestowed that book upon me just before her passing half a year ago. Every recipe included her handwritten observations, such as Tommy's favorite, and doubles perfectly for church potluck. Jillian rolled her gaze and retorted that deceased individuals have no need for recipes and that I was selfishly monopolizing perspective material. When Brett arrived after Jillian messaged him, claiming I was being aggressive, he did not inquire further. He immediately began lecturing me about supporting Jillian's aspirations and releasing the past. He actually referred to it as just some old recipes, while Jillian stood behind him, triumphant. I ultimately had to eject both of them. Then came Brett and Jillian's 5th anniversary gathering, an occasion Jillian had meticulously arranged. I resolved to mend fences by baking Grandma Rose's renowned triple chocolate confection, the formula that had secured victory at 3 county fairs and once prompted a judge to propose on the spot. I could not locate the recipe book anywhere. After thoroughly searching my dwelling, I telephoned Brett. The quiet extended so long, I verified if our connection had been severed. Finally, he mumbled something about consulting with Jillian. 20 minutes later, Brett appeared at my threshold, looking unwell. The truth emerged in fragments. Jillian had taken the book during a visit a fortnight ago while I was at work. She had photographed a few recipes, determined that was sufficient for her blog's aesthetic, and disposed of it on an online auction site to someone in Portland for $50. Her rationale, conveyed through Brett as if he were delivering a formal statement, was that I needed to release unhealthy attachments, and she required funds for her artificial tan. She had literally exchanged my family's heritage for an orange complexion. I stood there, fury accumulating within me, while Brett offered feeble justifications about Jillian being stressed by the celebration. Then something shifted. Instead of erupting, I smiled. Do not concern yourself with the cake. I will manage everything. My baker acquaintance, Carlos, owed me a favor from when I had assisted him in relocating a commercial oven. When I elucidated the situation, his eyes gleamed with mischievous delight. We spent the entire night crafting Jillian's ideal anniversary cake. 5 impeccable tiers that appeared ready for professional photography. The sugar roses seemed to blossom before one's gaze. The gold leaf shimmered like authentic treasure. It was the kind of cake that compelled individuals to pause mid-conversation and gaze. The base, reinforced cardboard concealed by just enough frosting to appear genuine. The filling between layers was primarily shaving cream blended with food coloring. The exquisite chocolate ganache drip, hair gel combined with cocoa powder. Carlos had surpassed himself with the structural design, ensuring it would remain intact until that pivotal initial slice. Loading the masterpiece into my vehicle this morning, I reflected on Grandma Rose. She used to remark, the finest recipes were not merely about components. They were about intention. This cake certainly possessed intention. But the question that persistently revolved in my thoughts was whether Brett would finally discern what his wife had become when her flawless event became a catastrophe. Regardless, Grandma Rose would have appreciated the irony. Jillian desired authentic family recipes. She was about to discover that in our lineage, retribution was a dish best presented as a 5-tiered architectural nightmare. What would you have done? I arrived at the anniversary party location 40 minutes early. The deceptive cake secured in a temperature-regulated container that Carlos had insisted upon. The grand pavilion resembled precisely what Jillian would select. All glass and polished metal with social media-worthy illumination. I maneuvered the cake trolley through the service entrance, avoiding the main doors where Jillian was likely already directing personnel like an inexpensive event coordinator. The display table occupied the center of the reception area, draped in white fabric with golden accents. I meticulously transferred the cake from its container, ensuring each tier aligned perfectly. The sugar roses captured the afternoon light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. It looked magnificent. Jillian materialized beside me within moments, her artificially tanned arms folded. She circled the table like a predator, scrutinizing every angle. I maintained a neutral expression while she indicated the cake's placement. She instructed me to rotate it 45 degrees to capture the light from the western windows. I complied. 2 minutes later, she desired it moved 6 inches to the left, then back to the right, then rotated again because the gold leaf was not reflecting the light correctly for her phone's camera. By the third adjustment, my hands began to tremble, not from exertion, but from suppressing laughter at what would transpire when she cut into this masterpiece. Brett appeared as I was repositioning the cake for the 4th time. He enveloped me in one of his characteristic strong embraces, the kind that used to signify that all was well between us. He leaned close to my ear and murmured his gratitude for attending despite everything. The sincerity in his tone almost prompted me to reconsider, almost. Jillian immediately had her phone out, the red recording indicator glowing as she documented our embrace. She narrated for her live audience about familial harmony and forgiveness, transforming the moment into marketable content. I glanced at her phone screen. 47 viewers, most with usernames like botfollower3847, and click here for prizes. She repeatedly mentioned how the gathering was becoming widely popular and thanked her supposed thousands of supporters. That is when she uttered it, as casually as discussing the climate. She referred to selling old items from the attic to finance this spectacular celebration. My stomach tightened. Old items. That is what 7 decades of family history had become to her. The twins, Marcus and Mason, noticed me from across the room. They broke away from the children's activity zone and ran over, their matching bow ties slightly askew. Marcus grasped my hand while Mason hugged my leg, both speaking over each other about their new athletic footwear and a frog they had discovered in the backyard. They inquired if I could sit with them during dinner. Jillian intervened before I could respond, her voice excessively sweet as she redirected them to the children's table on the far side of the room. She explained that adult tables were for grown-ups and promised them additional dessert if they behaved. The boys' expressions fell, but they obediently shuffled away. Jillian's smile never faltered as she assigned me to table 12, coincidentally, the one most distant from the main table and partially obscured by a decorative pillar. I retrieved my phone to record some of the arrangements, desiring proof of the intact cake before the unveiling. The battery indicator showed 15%. I had neglected to charge it last night, too absorbed in cake construction. I activated power-saving mode, needing to conserve what little remained for the crucial instant. Brett adjusted his cuff links while conversing with his university housemate near the bar. He mentioned something about misplacing his father's timepiece, the one their dad had worn daily until his passing. Brett seemed to believe he had misplaced it during their recent relocation. I knew better. That watch was likely adorning someone's wrist in a distant city by now, acquired for a fraction of its true value. 2 women from Jillian's reading group huddled near the gift table, their voices audible. One mentioned lending Jillian $300 for a medical emergency half a year ago. The other nodded knowingly. She was still awaiting Jillian to repay the $500 she had borrowed for vehicle repairs. They wondered aloud if they would ever see that money again. Jillian summoned me to assist in arranging the dessert display around the cake. She positioned me carefully, having me hold reflectors and adjust embellishments while she took pictures. Each shot necessitated precise staging, me just out of frame, sufficiently visible to be useful, but never included in the actual images. She posted each one immediately, adding filters and tags about her flawless event planning abilities. My phone vibrated. Carlos messaged asking if I required moral support, offering to drop by after his afternoon shift. I thanked him but declined. This was something I needed to manage independently. Furthermore, his presence might provoke inquiries I was not yet prepared to address. My Aunt Patricia paused by the cake table, admiring the presentation. She mentioned attempting to locate the family photo album she had lent Brett last Christmas, the one containing all the images from Grandma Rose's 90th birthday celebration. She had intended to make duplicates for the memorial service, but could not find it anywhere. I offered sympathetic sounds while mentally adding another item to Jillian's inventory of appropriations. The cloakroom erupted in minor disarray as two servers collided, causing a rack of garments to tumble. I hurried over to assist, gathering scattered coats and restoring order. A flutter of papers caught my attention, receipts falling from a designer jacket I recognized as Jillian's. I glanced around before picking them up. Pawnshop receipts dated over the past 6 months. A silver tea set for $80. Men's vintage timepieces for $200. Antique picture frames for $50. Each receipt, another fragment of family history converted into currency. I quickly captured images with my dwindling phone battery before returning the receipts to their original location. The disc jockey announced the cake cutting would occur in 2 hours after dinner service. I observed Brett across the room, laughing with his companions, blissfully unaware of his wife's activities. He appeared genuinely content, more at ease than I had witnessed him in months. A knot formed in my stomach. Was I making the correct decision? My cousin Emma appeared at my elbow, nursing a glass of wine. She mentioned that Jillian had requested to borrow her grandmother's brooch last month for a special occasion. The brooch had not yet been returned, despite Emma's gentle reminders. Jillian persistently claimed she had already given it back, causing Emma to question her own recollection. I retreated to a quiet corner and scrolled through old text messages, needing a diversion from the escalating tension. A message from Brett stood out, sent 3 months ago. I know Jillian can be challenging. She is experiencing something right now. Please be patient with her. She means well. Jillian's voice carried across the room as she regaled a table of Brett's colleagues with the tale of how I had declined to assist with event preparations. In her rendition, she had implored me to be involved, but I had been too self-centered and obstinate. She portrayed herself as the forgiving sister-in-law, still including me despite my difficult demeanor. The colleagues offered appropriate, sympathetic responses. The photographer Jillian had engaged was clearly operating on a limited budget. He spent most of his time capturing images of the decorations, the cake, and the venue itself rather than candid moments among guests. When he did photograph individuals, Jillian directed every shot, ensuring she was centered and perfectly illuminated, while everyone else became supporting figures in her spectacle. I approached one of the catering staff during a quiet interval, casually mentioning that the cake had some specific dietary considerations they should be aware of. The server barely glanced up from arranging appetizers, muttering something about being too understaffed to concern themselves with special requests. They had 3 other events that day and were already behind schedule. I decided to cease attempting to warn people. Better to await and observe, studying Jillian's patterns and conduct. She navigated the party like a director, adjusting people's positions, suggesting conversation topics, ensuring every moment could be captured for content. Her phone never left her hand. While assisting with arranging gifts on the designated table, I noticed a card from Brett's mentor at the architectural firm. Jillian had informed Brett that Mr. Davidson could not attend due to a scheduling conflict. Yet, here was his gift and card, indicating he had planned to come. Another relationship Jillian had discreetly severed. Throughout the cocktail hour, 3 different relatives drew me aside for hushed conversations. Each mentioned lending Jillian money over the past year. The sums varied, $200 here, $500 there, but the pattern was consistent. Emergency loans that were never repaid, always with elaborate excuses about why she required the cash. I performed quick mental calculations. Between the loans and the pawned articles, Jillian had extracted thousands from the family. And for what? Her supposedly successful food blog displayed 12 posts in 8 months, most with single-digit engagement. Her lifestyle surpassed any discernible income source. Mark, Brett's former university housemate, who now worked at the same company, found me by the bar. He appeared uneasy as he mentioned that Brett had been sleeping in his home office recently. When pressed for specifics, Mark became reticent, mumbling something about it not being his concern. But the apprehension in his gaze spoke volumes. I attempted to share this information with Emma, pulling her aside near the kitchen entrance. She listened but kept glancing away, clearly uncomfortable. When I concluded, she sighed and delivered the phrase I had been dreading. "It is not my marriage." She did not wish to become involved in whatever was transpiring between Brett and Jillian. Jillian must have noticed Mark and me conversing because she appeared moments later, a fresh glass of wine in each hand. She pressed one into Mark's hand and launched into an animated discussion about the firm's latest undertaking. Her laughter was too loud, her gestures too expansive. Mark excused himself after a few minutes, claiming he needed to locate the restroom. Brett joined our small group, but his attention was not on the conversation. He repeatedly checked his phone, his forehead creased with worry. When Jillian inquired what was amiss, he dismissed it as work matters, but I recognized my brother's tells. Something was troubling him, something he could not or would not disclose. The party continued around us, a whirlwind of forced interactions and staged instances. Jillian's facade never slipped. Her performance never wavered, but I observed. I waited, and I counted down the minutes until the cake cutting when her flawless pretense would finally shatter. Jillian directed me to assist with kitchen duties, pointing toward the service area with her wine glass. The head caterer looked stressed as I entered, immediately handing me a tray of appetizers to arrange. Through the kitchen's serving window, I watched significant party moments unfold while I remained concealed among the staff. The pattern felt familiar. This exact approach had alienated Brett's sister 3 years ago. A gradual erosion by countless minor exclusions, each one deniable individually. Uncle Ray wandered into the kitchen seeking ice. He mentioned seeing Jillian at the house 2 weeks ago when he had stopped by to return Brett's power tools. She had been loading boxes of what she called old photos nobody looks at anymore into her car. The timeline aligned. That visit occurred the same day my recipe book vanished. My hands tightened on the serving tray as the systematic nature of her appropriations became evident. The disc jockey's playlist continued without my requested song, the one Brett and I had danced to at his wedding. When I approached the booth between kitchen runs, the DJ shrugged and displayed his list. My song had been crossed out in red ink, too full written beside it in Jillian's handwriting. Another minor cruelty, another imperceptible slight designed to remind me of my subordinate position. I retrieved my phone and opened a notes application. My battery was now at 12%. Each detail went into a growing chronology: dates, items, amounts, witnesses. The list expanded with every conversation, painting a portrait of methodical exploitation. My thumb moved swiftly across the screen, documenting everything before my phone expired. Guests at the main tables voiced dissatisfaction about the wine quality, while Jillian's new designer footwear caught the light as she moved. The shoes alone likely cost more than the entire beverage budget. She had cited financial constraints when ordering the inexpensive wine, but her attire conveyed a different narrative. Several cousins exchanged knowing glances, but remained silent, their complicity palpable. A talkative caterer mentioned Jillian's attempt to reduce their payment that morning. She had claimed a misunderstanding about the guest count, attempting to deduct 20% despite the signed agreement. The catering manager had threatened to depart with all the provisions, compelling Jillian to pay the full amount. The server seemed pleased to share this gossip with someone who would actually listen. Brett's colleague drew me aside near the kitchen entrance. She had handled multiple calls from Jillian over the past months, each claiming a family emergency that necessitated Brett's immediate departure. The emergencies never materialized, but the pattern disrupted Brett's work sufficiently that his performance evaluations had suffered. His promotion prospects diminished with each fabricated crisis. I continued documenting, constructing a mental case file with each new disclosure. The urge to confront burned in my chest, but patience would serve as a superior weapon. Jillian's meticulously crafted image depended on maintaining control. Awaiting the opportune moment would amplify the impact. The cake cutting was postponed another hour. Jillian desired the sunset illumination for her photographs, insisting the golden hour would make her content widely popular. The delay meant more guests departing early, but she did not seem to notice or care. Her focus remained fixed on creating the perfect social media spectacle. Emma found me replenishing napkins in the service area. Her resistance had dissolved after a few more glasses of wine. She confessed Jillian owed her $300, borrowed for a dental emergency, that somehow resulted in a shopping spree instead. Jillian had sworn Emma to secrecy, claiming Brett would overreact if he knew about the loan. The network of debt revealed itself with each confession. A crash from the main room interrupted our discussion. Jillian had overturned a tray while gesticulating dramatically at the catering staff. Her mask slipped for just an instant, her voice sharp as she reprimanded the server for misplacing the tray. The server's eyes welled up as Jillian's true nature emerged through the carefully maintained facade. Jillian noticed me observing and quickly reverted to her party persona. She approached with an expensive bottle of wine from Brett's collection, offering it as a gesture of reconciliation. I recognized the label, an anniversary gift from Brett's mentor that was supposed to be reserved for their 10th anniversary. I politely declined, watching her jaw tighten at the refusal. The reception area had thinned considerably as evening approached. Family members offered excuses about early mornings and lengthy journeys, but the uncomfortable atmosphere prompted most departures. Those who remained clustered in small groups, voices lowered as they avoided Jillian's increasingly erratic attention. I discovered a printed blog post on the cake table, Jillian's latest content, featuring Grandma Rose's sugar cookies. She had photographed the recipe page before selling the book, presenting my grandmother's work as her own family custom. The appropriation had become monetized content. Each view, another minor betrayal. Marcus and Mason found me during a brief respite from kitchen duties. They mentioned their mother's new regulation about old playthings. Nothing cluttered could remain. Their collection of Brett's childhood action figures had vanished last week along with a vintage train set their grandfather had constructed. The pattern extended beyond valuable items to anything with sentimental significance. Brett appeared in the kitchen doorway seeking ice, mentioning his baseball card collection. He had believed he sold them last month to assist with expenses, but Jillian quickly corrected him through the serving window. She insisted they had been donated to charity, her voice carrying a cautionary edge. Brett's bewilderment was apparent. He clearly recalled discussing a sale, not a charitable contribution. Emma's support solidified after Jillian made a harsh remark about her recent divorce. The comment, delivered with a sympathetic smile that did not reach her eyes, pushed Emma past her breaking point. She joined me in the kitchen, rolling up her sleeves to help while muttering about Jillian's unkindness. Our small alliance felt like the initial breach in Jillian's carefully maintained control. The impulse to confront Jillian intensified with each disclosure, but strategic patience would yield superior outcomes. She would portray herself as the injured party if challenged directly, twisting any accusation into proof of familial envy. Better to allow her to expose herself through her own actions. During a toast that I observed from the kitchen doorway, Jillian raised her glass and spoke about the gathering representing family investment in their future. The bitter irony was not lost on those who had unwittingly financed this celebration through loans and pilfered articles. Several relatives shifted uncomfortably, beginning to piece together the truth. A neighbor who had been invited as a courtesy mentioned seeing Jillian loading boxes into her vehicle multiple times over recent months, always during work hours when Brett was at the office, always with boxes labeled donations that never seemed to reach any charity. The systematic nature of the thefts became undeniable. Two of Jillian's friends gathered their handbags after she drunkenly insulted one's parenting choices. The wine had loosened her tongue sufficiently to reveal the disdain she usually kept hidden. Her friend's face crumpled at the harsh words about her daughter's development. While Jillian laughed as if she had made a clever jest, the room's ambience shifted as more guests noticed Jillian's deteriorating conduct. She moved through the thinning crowd with her wine glass perpetually full, her movements becoming less coordinated. Most guests had switched to water or ceased drinking entirely, creating a stark contrast to her increasing intoxication. I sent a subtle inquiry in the family group chat about missing items, maintaining a light and curious tone. The response was silence. Messages read but unaddressed. Everyone knew, but no one wished to be the first to speak up. The burden of collective denial hung heavily in the digital quiet. Emma confronted Jillian about the missing brooch near the dessert table. Jillian's response came quickly and smoothly. She had returned it last week. Did Emma not recall? The psychological manipulation was masterful, causing Emma to doubt her own memory despite knowing the truth. I watched Emma's confidence waver under Jillian's assured falsehoods. Brett pulled me aside during a quiet moment, his face etched with concern. Funds had been scarce lately, but he could not comprehend why. His income had not changed, their expenditures seemed normal, yet their savings had diminished. He had begun tracking purchases, but the figures did not add up. The confusion in his eyes revealed how thoroughly Jillian had manipulated their finances. Jillian appeared at Brett's shoulder within seconds, her internal radar detecting our private conversation. Most guests had stopped attempting to engage with her, creating an island of empty space around her at her own celebration. She swayed slightly, wine sloshing precariously close to the rim of her glass. Mark caught my attention from across the room, holding up his phone. He had discovered online listings that corresponded to items from Brett's collection, a signed jersey, vintage baseball programs, memorabilia that should have been invaluable to my brother. He promised to send the links tomorrow when he could properly capture screenshots of everything. The mountain of evidence grew taller. I ensured Marcus and Mason remained occupied with their cousins in the children's area, desiring to shield them from the escalating tension. Their innocent chatter about school assignments and weekend plans provided a stark contrast to the adult drama unfolding around them. Protecting them from the repercussions became my secondary objective. Small groups of Brett's friends huddled near the bar. Their conversation focused on his altered demeanor over the past year. They had observed his withdrawal from group activities, his increasing excuses for missed gatherings. The pattern of isolation that I had recognized was apparent to others, too, though they had been too polite to mention it directly. Jillian cornered the photographer, demanding he erase several unflattering shots from his camera. Her priorities revealed themselves in her emphasis on appearance over substance. The photographer looked uncomfortable as she scrolled through his camera, rejecting any photo where she was not perfectly positioned. A venue staff member paused while adjusting the lighting, mentioning the cake appeared unusual under the new angle. The frosting seemed to shimmer differently than normal, the structure appearing slightly off. They shrugged and continued their work, dismissing their observation as an optical illusion. My pulse quickened at the near miss. Emma and Mark formed the core of my support network, while others offered subtle acknowledgement through meaningful glances and small nods. The family's reluctance to fully commit reflected years of avoiding disagreement, but fissures in their silence had begun to appear. Not everyone would stand with me, but I was not entirely alone. My phone vibrated with a response I had been anticipating. The individual who had purchased Brett's baseball cards had seen my message about them being stolen items. They confirmed the acquisition from a Jillian B. 2024 account and agreed to provide documentation. The vendor had claimed the cards belonged to her husband, who no longer valued them. Sunset approached as Jillian insisted on immediate cake cutting despite half the guests having already departed. Her desperation to capture the perfect moment overrode any consideration for those who left. She directed the remaining guests to gather tightly around the cake table, creating an illusion of a full celebration. Jillian's treatment of Brett escalated publicly as she chastised him for not socializing sufficiently. Her words cut deeply, each criticism designed to diminish him in front of his friends and family. Brett's shoulders slumped under the verbal assault, his earlier happiness completely extinguished. The emotional mistreatment had transitioned from private to public display. The truth became clear as I observed their interaction. This extended beyond pilfered items and money. Jillian was systematically isolating Brett from every support system. Each sold treasure removed a connection to his past. Each severed relationship eliminated potential allies. The appropriations were merely instruments in a larger campaign of dominance. I helped clean a wine spill near the gift table, choosing grace over gloating as Jillian's meticulously planned evening unraveled. The dignified approach felt solitary but essential. Whatever transpired next, I wish my actions to stand in stark contrast to hers. Jillian's livestream audience had dwindled to 12 viewers as her slurred speech became more pronounced. She continued narrating to her phone as if thousands watched, describing the perfect party, while reality presented a different picture. The disparity between her online fantasy and actual events grew more jarring with each update. Her university friend approached me while Jillian was preoccupied with photographs. She mentioned this behavior felt familiar. Jillian had done something similar with an ex-partner years ago. The pattern of isolation and control had existed long before Brett, suggesting a practiced methodology rather than situational cruelty. Brett found me arranging chairs and confessed he had been tracking missing items for weeks. He had believed his memory was failing, items disappearing that he could swear he had seen recently. The psychological manipulation had been so effective he had begun doubting his own perception of reality. His voice conveyed the weariness of someone who had been manipulated into questioning their own sanity. Jillian interrupted our conversation with an ultimatum delivered at full volume. Brett needed to choose between her and his toxic family. The words echoed across the reception area, drawing attention from remaining guests. Several phones appeared, though whether to record or arrange transportation home was unclear. Brett's response came quietly but firmly. They would discuss it at home. His attempt to defer confrontation felt like a small triumph, the first time I had witnessed him resist her demands in public. Marcus and Mason's toys vanishing breaks my heart. These poor children are losing fragments of their early years while their mother liquidates everything for party funds. Jillian's complexion darkened beyond her artificial tan, her control slipping with each passing moment. The cake-cutting ceremony commenced as the handful of remaining guests gathered around the display table. Jillian wielded the ornate knife with theatrical precision, positioning herself for the photographer's lens. The golden hour light streamed through the windows exactly as she had planned, casting dramatic shadows across the immaculate white frosting. She pressed the knife into the uppermost tier, anticipating a smooth glide through layers of sponge. Instead, the blade encountered unexpected resistance. Jillian's brow furrowed as she applied more pressure, her perfectly manicured fingers gripping the handle tighter. The frosting cracked oddly, spider webbing across the surface in unnatural patterns. The initial cut exposed the deception. Instead of moist chocolate cake, shaving cream oozed from between the cardboard layers, its artificial whiteness stark against the dark ganache exterior. Jillian stared at the mess, her mouth opening and closing without sound. The photographer lowered his camera, uncertain whether to continue documenting. I stepped forward from my position near the kitchen entrance, my voice carrying clearly across the stunned silence. I explained that this was what transpired when someone sold family recipes for artificial tan money. The words lingered in the air as comprehension dawned on the faces of the remaining guests. Emma moved to stand beside me, her phone already displaying screenshots she had taken earlier. She showed Brett the online auction listing for Grandma Rose's recipe book, complete with Jillian's username and the paltry $50 selling price. Other family members began murmuring their assent, finally finding courage in numbers. Mark stepped forward next, describing the online listings he had discovered for Brett's memorabilia, the signed jersey sold for a fraction of its worth, the baseball cards practically given away. Each item representing a piece of Brett's history, converted to currency without his knowledge. Mark's voice remained steady as he presented the evidence. More relatives found their voices, sharing narratives of loans never repaid and items that mysteriously vanished. The pattern became undeniable as each person added their piece to the puzzle. Jillian's meticulously maintained image crumbled with every revelation. Jillian flung the cake knife onto the table, sending shaving cream splattering across the white linen. She accused me of orchestrating a deliberate sabotage, her voice escalating to near hysterical levels. The remaining guests stepped back, creating more distance between themselves and her mounting fury. Security personnel hovered near the entrance, clearly deliberating whether to intervene. One made eye contact with me, but I shook my head slightly. This was family business, messy and intricate, but not requiring external intervention. They remained at their posts, watchful but uninvolved. Brett stood frozen between his wife and the growing circle of family members presenting evidence. His face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and dawning realization as the extent of Jillian's deceptions became clear. His hands clenched and unclenched at his sides as he processed the betrayal. I remained silent as Brett's world reshaped itself around the truth. There was no gratification in witnessing my brother's anguish, no vindication in being proven correct. The triumph felt hollow, tinged with the sorrow of what could not be salvaged. Brett turned to Jillian, his voice barely audible as he inquired directly about the recipe book. She deflected initially, then shifted tactics when cornered. Yes, she had sold it, but only because I did not deserve it. The justifications poured out. I was selfish, clinging to the past, impeding progress. Each excuse revealed more of her true character. Then came her masterstroke. Jillian claimed she had been selling items to pay for Brett's secret therapy and medication. She portrayed herself as the protective wife, shielding him from judgment while managing his hidden problems. The accusation landed like a physical blow, designed to shift focus and cast doubt. The room fell completely silent. Brett's face went pale, then flushed with anger as he denied any gambling issues or secret therapy. He demanded she explain where the money had truly gone, his voice gaining strength with each word. The power dynamic shifted visibly as Brett found his resolve. Jillian spun elaborate falsehoods about protecting Brett from himself, but the details crumbled under scrutiny. She could not name the therapist or the medication. The timeline did not match the appropriations. Her story unraveled as quickly as she constructed it. Brett retrieved his phone, accessing their shared bank account with trembling fingers. The evidence appeared in stark numbers, cash deposits matching the dates when family items went missing. Each transaction, another betrayal documented in their financial history. One of Jillian's friends, emboldened by wine and the collective revelations, quietly admitted what she had overheard. Jillian had boasted about funding shopping excursions through decluttering, laughing about Brett's unawareness. The friend's confession broke the last of Jillian's support network. I noticed Jillian's increasingly flirtatious behavior with the photographer throughout the evening, but chose to keep that observation to myself. The thefts and falsehoods provided sufficient evidence without adding unnecessary complications. Some ammunition was better left unutilized. Brett's announcement came with quiet finality. He needed space to think and would not be returning home with Jillian tonight. The boundary, small but significant, represented the initial crack in her control. Jillian's face cycled through shock, rage, and calculated manipulation in rapid succession. The tears came next, perfectly timed and expertly delivered. But something had shifted in the room's atmosphere. The performance that had worked so many times before now seemed transparent. The emotional manipulation too obvious to disregard. Even her remaining friends looked uncomfortable at the display. Marcus and Mason appeared at the edge of the crowd, their young faces bewildered by their mother's tears. Brett moved immediately, gathering his sons with gentle efficiency. He guided them toward the exit, his protective instincts overriding everything else. The boys' questions went unanswered as Brett focused on removing them from the toxic scene. Jillian's friend offered to drive her home, the only remaining gesture of support in a room full of turned backs. Jillian alternated between rage-filled accusations and self-pitying sobs as she was led away. Her departure lacked any dignity. The carefully crafted image completely shattered. Brett's message arrived an hour later as I helped venue staff clean the ruined cake. The message was brief but significant. He was staying at Mark's place, and we needed to converse tomorrow. The first step toward unraveling the web of manipulation had been taken. The recipe book purchaser responded to my earlier message with unexpected kindness. After seeing the family photographs I had sent showing Grandma Rose with her cookbook, they agreed to sell it back for the original $50. Shipping would take several weeks, but the book would return home. Small victories mattered in the aftermath of larger betrayals. Family members departed with awkward farewells, relationships strained, but not completely severed. Some still believed the deceptive cake went too far, whispering about proper channels and private confrontations. Others drew me aside to share their own accounts of Jillian's manipulations, creating unexpected bonds through shared experience. Finally free to speak candidly, I spent the remaining time assisting venue staff in cleaning the mess, finding unexpected satisfaction in the simple task of restoring order. Shaving cream and artificial frosting required multiple cleaning agents, but gradually the space returned to its original pristine state. The physical act of cleaning felt symbolic, though I avoided dwelling on metaphors. 2 months later, I stood in my kitchen preparing Sunday dinner from Grandma Rose's returned cookbook. Brett arrived with Marcus and Mason, their weekend visits now a regular occurrence. He had filed for separation, but not divorce, taking time to comprehend his role in enabling Jillian's behavior through therapy he had chosen for himself. Jillian had relocated back with her parents. Her social media was filled with vague, inspirational quotes about new beginnings and rising from adversity. The food blog disappeared quietly, the stolen recipes no longer generating the renown she had craved. Her attempts to portray herself as the victim found little acceptance among those who knew the truth. The family dynamics had shifted but not shattered. Some relatives still attributed blame to me for the public confrontation, preferring the comfortable silence of previous years. Others had found the courage to share their own stories of Jillian's exploitation, forging unexpected connections through shared experience. Brett had recovered some of his father's possessions from local pawn shops, though several items were gone permanently. The baseball cards returned from the understanding buyer. The signed jersey remained missing. Each recovered piece helped rebuild his connection to the past Jillian had attempted to erase. The deceptive cake had become a family legend, though versions differed depending on the narrator. Some emphasized the humor of the shaving cream filling, others focused on the harshness of the deception. The truth, as always, lay somewhere in the complex middle ground of justified anger and debatable methods. I had learned that retribution did not taste as I had anticipated. Not sweet like Grandma Rose's chocolate cake. Not bitter like Jillian's inexpensive party wine. Instead, it carried the intricate flavor of real life. Necessary, but uncomfortable. Justified, but costly. Satisfying, but tinged with sadness for what could not be preserved. Grandma Rose's recipes endured, now carrying new narratives alongside the old. Her neat handwriting still marked family favorites, but the pages also held invisible recollections of boundaries established, truth revealed, and the challenging cost of safeguarding what truly mattered. The cookbook had returned home, altered, but whole, much like the family itself. The deceptive cake might have been messy, but sometimes you require something shocking to make people pay attention. Thank you for listening to this account.